I've heard a lot of guys say, there's not much to my story. Are you kidding me? Like that victory story
Yeah.
is so much more significant. What a God story that is. Um, so whether it's that or it's the one of trauma and the prodigal son and redemption or whatever it is, as we get to know each other, what we've lived, we begin to understand each other. We begin to understand each other's temperaments. We begin to understand our triggers, our woundedness, our giftedness, maybe the holiness that we fail to see in us, and what God has done in and through us, so that we can encourage one another, we can pray for one another, we can rely on one another.
Let's go back in time. What are some of
Yeah.
the moments along the way that led you to what you're deeply passionate about today, and where you have arranged your focus, your purpose, your resources today? Like, give us a little bit of the
Yeah.
backstory.
I, as a young man, got wrapped up and addicted to drugs at a very early age. As a teenager, was walking the streets, contemplating suicide, and there was a street preacher on the corner preaching to absolutely nobody, and some older kids, college age, young adults, across the street mocking him. And I felt so bad for him. I walked up to him and he looked down at me and he said, "If you die today, what's going to happen? Where are you going?" And I just started weeping. And I'm thinking, how did he know? And so he prayed with me, gave me a little Gideon's New Testament Bible, and sent me on my way. And that was my first encounter with Jesus. And I'll fast forward about 4 to 5 years later, because I clung to that little Bible and tried to kind of do it on my own, isolated. And I did my best, but it just didn't work. I didn't have community. I didn't have discipleship. It was just me and this little Gideon's New Testament. And so that led to 4 or 5 years later, where led to an overdose. I was left for dead by my friends. And I went to a 12-step meeting. I finally came to, my uncle, who's in a 12-step program, brought me to my first 12-step meeting. And then I'm in a meeting and I met a guy named Tom. He went by Batman, and he was an ex-outlaw biker that had a Bible in front of him. And I had a polo shirt and khaki pants, and I'm looking at him and I'm looking at the Bible and I'm saying, man, something's not right here. This doesn't make sense in my
Yeah.
my youth and my immaturity and just not understanding. And at the end of the meeting, he said, "What do you know about it?" I said, "What?" He said, "The Bible. You've been looking at it the whole meeting." And I told him about the man I met on the street corner, and he hijacked me, brought me to the inner city to a house. And I thought, okay, this could be the end for me. I don't know what's going to happen. And I walked in and there were 20 guys that looked just like him. And I walked in and they said, "What's your name?" I said, "Steve." And he said, "Well, now you're little Steve." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because that's big Steve."
It's already claimed.
And so that was it. And these guys loved on me. They showed me and modeled authentic community. They discipled me. They gave me a job. They said, hey, here's some work. Here are the stipulations. You're going to a 12-step meeting every day. You're coming to Bible study every night, church twice on Sunday. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning when I got to understand what God intended with community and discipleship. And I've just been on fire for it and hungered for it ever since. So that's really the story that I wanted to share with you.
Wow. When I think of the power of these guys deciding to be welcoming, let's bring somebody else into our crew versus settling with, we have our friends, we're good to
Yeah,
go. And the stories, I mean, your story changing, but the amount of other men, because I know more of your story And it's funny, even in the intro, like I've been calling you Sarge and you mentioned Steve. So you go
Yeah,
by
yeah.
both. You said, yes, that's true.
Yes, yes.
Steve Sargent, we're calling you Sarge today in the conversation. It's like the amount of stories that you've had the opportunity to
Mm,
be a spark, be a part of a series of nudges in someone's life because of your commitment to brotherhood and forming and
yeah,
offering to be there in the highs and the lows. And so that's one piece that I know has informed your like wanting to help create this for other men. What are some of the other factors upstream that have led to that being a deep passion today, brotherhood and guys having a foxhole?
to be honest, it comes down to fatherhood. To be honest with you, I mean, you fast forward, I'm married, 5, 6 years, 7 years, and I've got toddlers at home, and I'm trying to figure it out, right? And I'm doing the work thing, and I'm trying to, build my little kingdom for my family, and saying like, how do I be the best husband and the best dad, and kind of, going to church on Sunday, but I don't know, like I need more. I need more than this. I need more support. I need somebody to show me what this looks like. And got plugged in, and I asked, I inquired, I went up front, I said, who do I talk to? How do I get plugged? Who knows where there's men gathering and talking and getting into real life, and that I could be mentored, and they directed me, to my buddy Mark and his doorstep, and he just happened to have a group of 5 guys meeting in his basement asking the same questions, not that they had it all figured out, but asking the same questions, and that led me to experience that again, and to be able to see what it looks like to have true, authentic Christian community, life on life relationships with other men. And so that was the next phase or stage. Um, and then fast forward again another 5 to 10 years, and I was looking for more depth.
Yeah.
Let's go deeper, let's go even deeper, and got introduced to a brother who introduced me to another brother who happened to experience this ministry out in Colorado called Mark Men for Christ. And he said, hey, you want to come on this intensive weekend? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, you do? Because everybody else is, I don't know, right? And,
Yep.
I went on that weekend. That was, almost 15 years ago, and I've been going on those weekends ever since. And that ministry, the changed my life. God changed my life through that ministry and the tools that they use, and it just became part of how I live and how I talk and how I operate, and being able to do life with other men and disciple them and be discipled by them. So that's been sort of the journey.
And this stuff is contagious. Sarge, like it's contagious hearing you talk right now, but also just hearing
Mm,
the other conversations I've listened to in your podcast, the Foxhole Symphony podcast, which we'll talk more about. It like it's contagious once a man has experienced the
mm,
life-changing deeper levels of brotherhood, realness, authenticity, um, mission, purpose, freedom. I mean,
mm,
when that stuff is experienced, when you have stories of, I was there baptizing my son and daughter and this other brother, it can't help but be changed because him and his son were there in the room.
mm.
When you go to those events and you say yes to the crazy, fly to an event of a ministry you didn't know anything about, and you just said yes, you're telling others about it. And the interesting thing is it's contagious. Brotherhood, deeper friendship is contagious, but it actually doesn't spread very fast because there's not that many of us who have gone to the deeper levels to invite. It just feels like there's a lot of people stuck at the shallow and think that's it. And they think that I've
Yes.
got a bunch of
Mm.
friends that I can text, so I'm good. And I'd love for you to speak on that topic for a moment of the shallow and settling there and not having any
Mm.
awareness that there's a whole lot more.
Brother, I don't even know what to say about that other than um, there is so much more. And, I don't know whether or not I even knew that there was so much more. I just believed that there had to be, because for me, there was just this discontent and this stirring and this like I again I my family would say I'm a deep person. I'm intense. I'm emotive, right? So like I can't speak for those that aren't, that just would rather, be steady. And there's a lot to be said for being steady as opposed to, erratic, like I am. But I came down to Florida and I'm like, I jumped into this men's group expecting it to be what I had in New Jersey. And I looked around and exactly what you just described. And a guy so graciously and warmly slid his cell phone number across the table and said, "Hey, text me." And I'm like, thank you. But that was at the end of a meeting where 35 men spent an hour and a half giving advice to one another on the topic of failure without sharing a single life experience. I didn't learn a single thing about any one of those 33 men. I couldn't even tell you anything other than some first names. Nothing about their lives, their family, their kids, their marriage, what's going on at work. Nothing. And I was so sad and discouraged. And I thought, God, Lord, I certainly hope you didn't send me down here to turn this around, because I don't know that I've got the patience for this. I'm just being honest.
Yep.
Like, I don't know that I've got the patience for it. Like, I feel like I need it. I don't, and, but boy, when you start to peel back the layers and you experience vulnerability and intimacy and accountability and authenticity and these things where, you could say to another man, you could look him in the eye, say, "Brother, how's your heart? How's your heart today? How's your marriage? What's going on? How can I pray for you?" And you get something back that's real. Or I can look a man in the eye and I can share something so raw and outrageous that I would never share with anybody else. And I can do that because I know I'm not going to be judged,
Yeah.
but I'm only going to receive the Christ love and back, nothing but grace. That's special and that's transformative.
Yeah. People, men, dads want to live a good story. But if they're showing up at groups at church and not hearing advice given, but no story, or if they are hearing posturing of highlight reels,
Mm,
the
mm,
posturing of a bunch of highlight reels does nothing to inspire me to live a better story. It actually fuels discouragement. That's what it fuels.
yeah.
Now we created something. I'm sure it's not anything new and inventive, but we call them the 7 minute slice. And because of the sake of time, with different groups I've gathered with, different groups of dads. Instead of going long form, which I treasure, the campfire, give me an hour and a half. I want to hear. I'm just listening. I want to hear your story, long form. I treasure that. But the realities of a lot of the gatherings that I lead and I've been a part of, the 7 minute slice is we set a timer on our phone for 7 minutes, and the whole group leans in and says, "We want to hear some of the peaks, some of the victory moments, and some of the valley
Mm,
moments. Just give me some, share some of the
mm,
that make up your story, just some of them." And it could be just this chapter of the last 3 years, some of the victories and valleys, or it could be all back when you were in college or back when you were in junior high. But the treasure gift, when that timer goes off,
mm.
I'm crying, no matter who the guy is. Like, no matter who the guy is and what the
I
story
love it.
was and how much of, from a surface level, it feels like that guy played it safe in life. And it's just, no, when people are willing to share the deeper, I feel like
Mm,
I love this brother. And it makes me want to share my peaks, my victories and valleys. So that exercise of just like, let's be real. And there's as
mm,
much to celebrate and learn from. The best stories have valleys. They do, all of them.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I'd love for you to just like respond to that idea of story and treasuring people's story and why we need to
yeah,
create moments to get these stories shared and what the
yeah.
benefits are of doing that.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. And you said it very, very well, right? Like you when you ask somebody to hear their story, or a 7 minute slice, and there's sort of this, we've all experienced this, right? Like tell me your story. and there's sort of just like no depth or detail, or and 7 minutes goes by and you're
Yep.
like, I actually don't know anything about you. Like, tell me more. Let's go another inch
Mhm.
deeper. But the power of story is so
Mhm.
significant because it highlights, not it's not our highlight reel, it's God's highlight reel. And I honestly, yes, certainly the valleys, you know, I learned a long time ago that to value the story that doesn't have the trauma,
Mhm. Yep.
right? But is simply a God victory of someone that grew up in a good Christian home and went to church and loved the Lord and grew in the Lord and never really experienced trauma or chaos, never broke the law or did drug and you know and I've heard a lot of guys say, there's not much to my story. Are you kidding me? Like
Mm.
that victory story
Yeah.
is so much more significant than some, a story like mine with trauma and mess and all of it. It's like, I mean, that is a miracle. That is a miracle that you came through your life and never went off the rails. Like, what a God story that is. Um, so whether it's that or it's the one of trauma and the prodigal son and redemption or whatever it is, wherever it is on that trajectory, as we get to know each other, what we've lived, and we begin to understand each other. We begin to understand each other's temperaments. We begin to understand our triggers, our woundedness, our giftedness, maybe the holiness that we
Yeah.
fail to see in us, and what God has done in and through us, so that we can encourage one another, we can pray for one another, we can rely on one another. And more than any of all of that, we can glorify God in every one of those stories.
Yes. Oh man. Sarge, I love that doubling down and your perspective on why like the story doesn't have to have this perfect low high. Like truly everyone's story is unique and God is working right in it in their gifts. And sharing
Yep.
it's the gift. The gift is not a gift unless you share it. Like it's
Mm.
I wanna actually go to a couple chapters of dad life and you to share learnings could be
Yeah.
share some like misses of you missed it here or learned here
Yeah.
or man, like you loved and treasured, you got this part right. It could be any of the above, but start with my
Mm.
phase of my girls are age 3 through 10. So kind of that
Yeah.
single digits phase. And then we'll do kind of junior high, high school phase as a second round of just gathering insights. And then I
Yeah.
definitely want to get to these last 2 to 4 years and what you've kind of that you mentioned earlier, the breakthrough.
Sure. So 3 to 10, that is, man, they were some great years. I the one thing I want to mention about fathering and parenting, and my wife and I say this all the time, coming up, and even in the church, we would hear people say, "Oh, you think it's hard now? Just wait. I mean, the teenage years are going to be awful. Oh, and then you think that's bad? Just wait until they're young adults. You're going to want them out of the house as soon as possible." Like it's just this like wet blanket. I'm like, and we always found that odd because yeah, there's challenges, but we have just relished parenting. Like
Mhm.
we've relished. We're like, no, 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 no. This is such a great phase. We don't want it to end. And then it only gets better, and then it gets better. And that's been our story. So I share with you, I mean, 3 to 10, and believe me, we screwed up plenty. I'll speak for myself. I screwed up plenty, especially in those early years, which is what led me to seek out other men who were further on than I, because I was angry. I didn't understand my woundedness. I didn't understand my identity in Christ. I was just, wrestling through life and stressed out. And, listen, that anger came out of my family more than it did anybody else,
Mhm.
and I worked from home. And so, during those years, my son, he was home. He wanted to play. My daughter was at school. My son wanted to play. I don't have time to play. My dad's
Mhm.
working, and that wounded my son,
Yeah.
even though there were healthy boundaries set too. And I actually probably played with my son more than most dads do in a given day. But the fact that I was there all
Mhm.
day and
Uh,
he saw me, and I was working most of that day. It created challenges. And so those were some of the things that we dealt with during those years.
mm,
Fast forward a little bit into the middle school and teenage years.
yeah.
Um, I remember sitting at the kitchen table listening to my daughter and really listening and thinking to myself, I have absolutely no ability
Yeah.
to deal with what she's talking about right now. And I literally looked at her and I said, I'm so sorry you're going through
Mhm.
whatever it is you're going through. I can't understand it. I don't know what I can give you. And I looked at my wife and I just went, what do we do with
Yeah.
this? Because I was never a teenage girl and I don't understand what's happening. And my wife was like, "Oh yeah, this is normal." And I'm like, "What? This isn't no this is like she's imploding. Oh no, 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 this is normal." So those were interesting years and she's having a tough time in school and friends and all of that. And then there's dating and I'm just going to say it. I had a double standard for my kids dating, and my daughter, there were boundaries and rules and all kinds of things in place. And she's the older one. And then, my son comes along and wants to, I'm like, yeah, man, go for it. You got this.
It's totally different.
Very few rules, and they remind me all the time, my daughter, and so all sorts of double standards with the boy and the girl. But we sought counsel, we did
Mhm.
our best, we prayed through it. My wife and I did our best to stay aligned, and I think that was a critical factor in whatever success we had as parenting children. Um, we were committed to that. We were committed to one another. No good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
We're aligned. We're in this together. Um, but what I'm most excited to share with you
Yeah.
is what's happened more recently, and that is, a couple of years ago. And I shared a little bit about my story, and it was messy. I mean, my wife. I met my wife in college, and I was a disaster. I was off and running and running and gunning, and some would say,
Yeah.
and messed up and all, wrapped up in all the wrong things. And ultimately that not only was wrapped up in drugs and addiction, but led to prison and an extensive time in behind bars. And you know, I remember as I started to grow in my faith, it was so hard for me to get beyond the shame of that. And I thought, this it was my identity. How could I ever get beyond this? And thank God he put some gracious pastors in my path and people that just were like, "Oh yeah, that's just your story. Like you're forgiven. We love you." And and just and I remember being so
Mm.
amazed by that, and again experiencing God's love and grace through that. But the thing that haunted me for years was, how am I ever going to tell my kids this? If I want my kids to really know my story, to
Mhm.
know their dad, uh, how on earth am I ever going to share this and when? And so for years, I agonized over this and I prayed, God, would you make it clear when it's time to tell them my story? Because I just don't want them to see me as that guy that seems like another life. I mean, gosh, it
Mhm.
was 30 years ago. Um, and I'm praying and praying and praying and praying for years. And finally, about 2 years ago, I read a book. Uh, and I won't get into to the book, although I will recommend it. Chris
Great.
Bruno's Sage. The book is Sage by Chris Bruno.
We love that book. We've interviewed him
Do
and
you
we
know?
love that book.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, so
Yes.
Chris is a great guy, dear brother.
Yeah.
And man, that book changed, it rocked my world. It changed my life. And that in conjunction with hearing from God in some other ways, I knew it was time.
Yeah.
And I'm it was at a time where I was praying for deeper intimacy with my kids. I want a deeper relationship with my kids. And my son and I were doing this a little bit, bumping heads, and he was going off to college. and I'm laying into him about college and the partying that goes on, and you can't do this, and no this and no that, and laying down the law. And he's like shocked. He's like, where's this coming from? Well, it's coming from my woundedness, my story, right? But he didn't know that. He didn't have the context. And God was like, it's time. I'm like, oh man. And so I made a decision. I'm going to share my story with my kids. And I got with my son in the car, and I said, son, it's important to me that you understand some of where this has been coming from. And I apologized for the umpteenth time, which is another thing I want to highlight, that throughout my kids' entire childhood, I apologized over and over and over and over and over again and modeled that for them. It's one of the greatest things I ever did. Um, and my son still thought I was a superhero. And like he had to live up to, who dad is and the success of dad, and thinking, man, he doesn't know the half of it. And so when I shared with him what happened, I shared the whole story and meeting mom and drugs and addiction and prison and all of this. And he looked at me, he was like, and he said, wow, I have so many questions. And I said, man, I'm an open book.
Mhm.
Nick, tell me, ask me, whatever you want to ask me, I will tell you. But what happened, what God did through that, is he healed my son from this burden that he took on as having to be as good as dad. He removed that burden. Like, you don't have to be dad. You just be you in Christ. And I've got a path for you. And it also gave him the context for why I was so agonized over him going to college and where he was going to go and who he was going to connect with, and fraternities and drugs and boozing and all of that. And it made sense all of a sudden. And that developed intimacy and newfound trust. And with my daughter, I sat with my daughter and I told her, and her first response was so different.
Mm.
She said to me, these were her first words. I can't believe mom married you. And that's what I was like, oh wow, that stings a little. But you know what? You're right. And I said to her, I said, you know why she married me? Because more than anybody else in the world, mom saw who I really was, beyond what I was doing, beyond my circumstances, deeper than that. She knew my heart, and she saw Christ in me. And she knew that I was so much more than the way I was living. And maybe she shouldn't have, but thank God she did. And so that's been a beautiful thing. It's been a beautiful story. And I said, you should ask mom about that.
Mhm.
Ask mom about that. And she did. So that's been our journey, man. It's wild, and it's beautiful, and God's fingerprints are all over it, in spite of our sin and mistakes along the way.
Sarge, thank you. Thank you for like inviting us into that part of your story. And my heart, like I just felt a response of there's really a fragmented story that your son was living, not knowing the full story, uh, that shaped who you are. It has shaped who you are, the level of grace you've experienced and forgiveness, and but also the things that carry forward even after forgiveness is there. You carry, knowing the lows of the low, like and remember, so you don't want that to be repeated for your son. But the wholeness, like we want his
Mm,
dads to live wholeheartedly, whole lives,
mm,
wholly, like surrendered to God, bring our whole selves to our marriage, our kids, and the Malachi mandate, the Malachi 4:6, about the turning of hearts, fathers to
mm,
children, the turning of hearts, children to father. You can't turn your heart if you don't fully know and trust. And not that there was a lack of trust, but there's something about transparency that probably was the gateway to some of this closer intimacy. Does that
a-
resonate how I'm reflecting
absolutely.
back?
100%. And to be honest, one of the catalysts, one of the main catalysts was, Mark and I, we started the podcast, Foxhole Symphony a couple of years ago. And I remember him asking me, like, it's all about men in authentic community. It's
Mm,
about having authentic relationships, taking the masks off, getting rid of the poser syndrome, and having real relationships, being real, especially with those closest to us.
yeah.
And I remember him asking me like, "Hey, you got a story to tell, and I know your kids don't know your story. Like, are you going to be able to share openly and authentically and transparently with, not that everybody needs to know every dirty detail of our lives. That's not what I'm suggesting, but as the hosts of this podcast, like, and I was so convicted, and God used that to convict me and tell me it's time. Like, yeah, they need more of it. They need to see your heart. They need, if you want this authentic relationship with your kids, you've got to pull back that curtain and show them more of who you are and more of your heart and the heart I've given you. And a lot of that was formed and shaped and transformed through the valleys and the trauma and the mistakes and the sin. So, and the failures, right? So
Mm.
it is, it's important. It's important.
Yeah, living in the light, really.
Living in the
Like
light.
like
Yes.
taking parts of us that we've been just like, let's hang on to that, keep it in the shadows. Let's keep that Adam and Eve first moment of
Mm,
shame of like, let's hide from God. And of course, prayerfully, of course, get other brothers to pray for you. When you, I mean, when there's like taking things, there's guys listening that there's things their wife they don't know. And how like
mhm.
that's limiting intimacy. There's things that again to kids or to brothers, and there's trust to be built. It takes you can't go zero to like to a
Yeah.
group. Like there's a process. But the more I hope every dad listening can just like it is worth the work and the prayerful, humble, like these steps of living in the light have way more that they're explosive and they're multiply the impact and the fruit and the lives touched because it's way more than just
Yeah.
that one-on-one relationship. You brought something that one person is just stays there. Like it actually unlocked to you your testimony being shared now on Dad Awesome and on your own podcast and beyond because of the freedom that your kids know the real you. I mean, not the real you, but the part of your story that has shaped
Yeah.
who you are.
Exactly, exactly, and God's part in that because He wants to use it all. He wants to use it all. He'll use the mess that we've created. He'll use, so, again, I think he has. I mean, he doesn't have to, but that's the redeeming work of God in our lives, and so
Wow.
yeah, I mean, just amazing, amazing
Wow.
things.
Foxhole Symphony. These, like,
Yes,
I've heard several friends talk about these guys are in my foxhole. These guys are taking like the military strategic
yeah,
protective in a foxhole because it's protection from flying shrapnel. But then use pairing it with symphony. I actually don't fully understand, but I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by it. Tell
yeah.
me why you paired those two words with this ministry.
It's exactly what I was just talking about. It's God making beautiful music out of our mess. That's the symphony. There's this, men coming together into the pox. There's shrapnel, there's bullets flying, there's mud, it's messy, there's dirty, it's scary, right? There's all this adrenaline and emotion, and we've got each other's backs, and and God just makes something beautiful out of it. He takes it all and wraps it up, and there's just this beautiful symphony that results, but it results from the offering, the willingness and the offering to offer that mess to God. And that's why I say He'll use it all, but we've got to offer it to Him. Otherwise, it's just our mess that we hold on to, right? In isolation, in the darkness, like you said, hanging out, just gripping onto it. But when we offer it to the Lord, He makes something, it's beauty from ashes, right? I mean, it's so that's the symphony part of the foxhole.
And we can receive love and comfort, the gift of the Holy Spirit and God's forgiveness. We can go to the beach and walk and pray and um, experience love, comfort, and forgiveness. But I don't think we can be made whole and healthy and healed until, as we're invited, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. Like there's a
Mhm.
promise attached to each other, and that's not talking to the Holy Spirit and God and Jesus. Like that is a to brothers. Would you agree with me on that side of the second half of healing?
One 100%. 100%. And it is so clear and it's so simple,
Mhm.
but are we willing? Are we willing to do it? Right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Confess, pray, be healed. Wow, it's that easy?
Yes, what a gift. What a gift. And it does take, like we've mentioned a couple times, it takes work and it takes digging into if this is something, guys listening, if this is like, oh, there's repair needed. There's I want to live in
Mm,
freedom. I want to have these closer brothers that can be there when I baptize my daughter someday because they've shared in my story and my victory. I want them to pray for me the moment I have that hard conversation with a teenager or this or that. I'm going to send them to your resources at Foxhole Symphony. So they're going to be sent in your direction. You mentioned the book by Chris Bruno, Sage. Can you any other just top of mind resources that you're like, this will help in the journey of getting oh, the ministry, the retreat that you went to, what was that called one more
yeah,
time?
yeah,
Mhm.
markedmenforchrist.org. A
Okay.
phenomenal intensive phase 1 weekend that has changed. I mean, I've had hundreds and hundreds of men go through that weekend, and the vast majority of them look back and at that weekend as a mile marker that just catapulted them into authentic community. And more than that, it's about knowing why God gave you breath today. How are you uniquely gifted and potentially uniquely wounded? But how does God want to use it all? What is your unique mission? What is God calling you to? And why did He give you breath today? And
Wow.
that's what that ministry is all about.
Wow. So we'll link that out, resource that. Any other top resources on around this topic?
I don't think so. I mean, I
Yeah.
think those are the main ones.
Good collection. Yeah.
Just under dad awesome.
Yeah.
Just under dad awesome.
Not under, alongside. We're happy to be a part of. And
I know.
the guys do know this is about a every third week we're talking about brotherhood. You can't be dad awesome and just pursue the hearts of your
Mm,
kids and your wife. Like you
mm.
have to do it with brothers. So we've emphasized that so many times. They're like sick of hearing me say it, but it's like this is the way to be dad awesome. So I wanted to invite you, Sarge, just either if you have a last word, wonderful, or would you just pray for all of us,
Yeah.
or both?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've said probably enough words. I would love to pray. I'd
Right.
love to pray. Yeah, thank you, brother. Well, God, thank you. Thank you so much for this sweet time of fellowship with my brother. And God, I pray that you would be glorified through this message, that hearts would be stirred. Thank you for the ministry of Dad Awesome, for every person hearing this, Lord. Now, I pray that you would draw each of us into closer and deeper intimacy with you, Lord. I pray for our families, our marriages, Lord, for deeper intimacy there, perhaps even through vulnerability and transparency with our wives, sharing just a little bit more about what makes us tick and our woundedness or whatever it is. Maybe it's confession with our kids, Lord. This world is crazy, Lord, but you remain on the throne. You are sovereign and protect our kids, Lord. Help us to be the best dads we possibly can. But more than that, Lord, help us to point them toward you, the father that we could never be to our kids. Thank you for the loving father that you are to us, that we are adopted as your sons. Lord, thank you that we can call you Abba, Daddy. You are so good and faithful and gracious. In Jesus' name, amen.